Hi, welcome back to my channel, and today we are doing homework 1.2, encapsulation. So this time we're going to be using getters and setters, and we're starting with our messages again and our matrix that we created. And then I have this little number right here. This is Cas20 change to mat, so that's a separate class. And change to mat means it's changing the characters, so the message that I put in, into the numbers that correspond with those characters. So as you can see, I like jazz, and these are the numbers that correspond with that. And for the second message, I like food. These are the numbers that correspond with that message. And those are printed out. For the next part, we are going to show 4 decoded messages, and I'm going to run my code just to make sure it works, of course. Okay, so the first thing we're doing is we are doing a scalar times a matrix. So I'm just doing the scalar times my message matrix, which is mat m, and I already turned that into the numbers which are displayed here, but I'm actually going to use this first one. So I'm going to use I like jazz and its corresponding numbers. So I am using getters and setters. What a getter and a setter does is it doesn't let a guest user come in and change up your entire code, but rather it limits them. So we have turned everything to private, which means that they cannot access those things. And a getter and a setter is how they do access what they need. So I'm going to start with mat1, and I'm going to get scalar. So that function is this function right here. And this function, what it does is if the scalar is equal to 0, it's going to tell me. The first function I'm going to call is getScalar, and that is this function right here. What this does is if the scalar is equal to 0, it's going to print out a statement saying incorrect scalar, scalar is 0, because a 0 scalar is not valid. I'm going to set this equal to what I have set it equal to in my main, and I'm going to plug in the information. So as you can tell, we have a double scalar and a double matrix. And we also have a matrix and a scalar, because while multiplication is the same to us, the computer cannot understand if we put the matrix in first. If we only had this function up here, we would have to always put the scalar in first. And that's why we created 2 functions. So therefore, whatever the user wants to input is possible. So we're going to input 5 and matrix m. And then I'm going to print out the result. So let's run this. So obviously, this is those top 2 that I printed out. These are the equivalent. So this is my numbers that represent my message multiplied times 5. And then they are multiplied times 0.2, which is the inverse of 5. And then I'm printing out the message. So I am encoding it, decoding it, and then showing you the message that I get. So I set the scalar, and then I get the result. What this function does, get result, is it collects all this data from each of these. So set mat a, set scalar, and it's going to take that result and it's going to keep it here so that we can access it in the main class, and we call that function. So we say get result mat mat1 get result, and then I have mat1 print. So instead of having a print at the end of every one of these functions, we just made a print method. And we have print and print m. So print m is for message, and print is just for the numbers, an array, things like that. So I'm going to print it out. I'm going to space it out. So this is, I'm printing this encoded matrix out. Now I'm going to print out the decoded matrix out. So I want to set scalar because I'm still multiplying a scalar and a matrix, and I want to multiply that times the matrix that I got as a result of, because I want to turn it back to its original numbers. So I round it because I don't want a million decimals, and then I print it, and I actually set this result equal to mat D. And that way I can print out the characters, and I'm going to use this public static char method that's change to message. So it's going to take the numbers that represent each of those values or those letters, and it's going to turn it back into letters. So it's going to turn it back into a message. Now for the next one, we are doing the exact same thing. We're just placing the matrix in first and then the scalar. And that's just proof that it works both ways. What we have down here is the multiplication of matrix M and A. So matrix M is my message matrix. And that's the numbers that represents those letters. So I'm going to set mat A. So now we're using set mat A. Set mat A is right here. And this is the multiplication of two matrices. So if it's not long enough or the dimensions mismatched, it's going to tell us, and it's going to print this out. And if it equals 0, if the determinant equals 0, it's going to say incorrect, because it can't have an inverse. But else, it's going to multiply them together. And that's what we want. So I put two matrices in, and I multiply them. And I'm going to get these numbers over here. And now I want to decode them. So that's encoding, now I want to decoding. So I want to take the inverse of matrix A, and that's the matrix that I created, and I want to multiply that times the result. I want to round it, of course, because I don't want a million decimals, and I want to print it. And I'm doing exactly what I did before. I'm turning the numbers I got back into the message. So for the last part, I'm actually taking the second message, and I'm multiplying it times mat A, or mat A2. So why don't we try mat A2? So what is happening here is I am multiplying matrix M2. So that's my message matrix. I'm multiplying it times my number matrix, which is up here. And that's just a matrix I created. And then I'm turning it into numbers. So this is the multiplication of those two matrices, and I printed that. Now I want to go backwards because I want to decode it. So I'm going to take the inverse of matrix A2, which is my own matrix, and I'm going to multiply that times the result that we've gotten from this. I'm going to round it because I don't want a million decimals, and then I'm going to print it. And I'm going to set a mat to mat D, and then I'm going to use this function again from this cast system that says change to mess, because I want the original message. So as you can see, these numbers, I like food, lines up with this second numbers. And that is my second message, I like food. So you have your main class, and you could put this side class I have all into one. I just decided to spread it out a little. And you have your set scalar, and your set scalar, and your set mat A. What you're doing is you're grabbing it from here, and you're accessing it. But you're not giving this guest user all the access so that they can just plug in whatever they want. You're giving them limitations, and that's what a getter and setter method does. Thank you. Have a good night.